It was a crisp autumn evening at Lisbon Airport, and passengers shuffled restlessly through the terminal. Among them was none other than Cristiano Ronaldo, the famed footballer, who was on his way back from an international match. Dressed in a sleek black jacket, his face shielded by a pair of sunglasses, he navigated the crowd with ease. Though he was a global superstar, Ronaldo was used to blending in when he wasn't on the field, and this was just another one of those quiet moments in his life. But tonight, things were about to take a turn that would see him thrust into the role of something much more than a famous athlete. It had all started innocently enough. Passengers, including Ronaldo, had checked in for their flight to Madrid, only to find out that their flight had been delayed. No one seemed too bothered at first. Delays happened all the time, especially during peak travel seasons. But as the hours passed, the delay continued to drag on. The board, which once read a hopeful on time, had now been updated multiple times to read delayed in bold red letters. The frustration of the passengers started to mount. First, there was confusion. Then came the murmurs of discontent. Several people had questions for the airline staff, but each time they approached the counters, they were met with curt replies and vague explanations. "We don't know why the delay is happening," one airline representative had said, her voice cold and detached. "Please be patient. We'll update you when we have more information." But as the hours passed, no more information came. A few polite passengers tried to speak to the airline employees, hoping for a bit more transparency, but the responses only seemed to worsen. "Can you just give us a time?" one woman asked politely, her young daughter in tow. The employees stared at her, unblinking, before sighing heavily. "When we know, you'll know." Ronaldo, watching from the periphery, noticed the growing frustration. He wasn't the kind of person who typically made a scene in public, but something about the way the airline was treating these people irked him. He had flown around the world countless times in his career, and though he was used to being treated with respect, he knew that other travelers didn't always share the same privileges. This was different though. This was blatant rudeness. It was then that he noticed an elderly couple sitting nearby, looking as though they were ready to cry. The husband, a man in his late 70s with a heavy gray beard, appeared to have trouble breathing, his hands trembling as he adjusted his coat. The woman beside him, perhaps in her 60s, glanced nervously toward the board, then back at her husband. Ronaldo could see the anxiety in their eyes, the unmistakable discomfort of people who had no idea what was going on. Unable to stay quiet any longer, Ronaldo stood up from his seat, his frame cutting through the crowd like a lighthouse in a storm. He approached one of the airline employees at the counter and cleared his throat. The employee, a young man with disheveled hair and a tired expression, looked up, not recognizing him at first. "Excuse me," Ronaldo began, his voice calm but firm. "Could you please explain why we're being delayed for so long? People are waiting here, confused and frustrated, and no one seems to have any answers. This is unacceptable." The employee blinked, as if momentarily stunned by the unexpected confrontation. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't have any information at the moment. As I've already told the other passengers, we will update you when we can." Ronaldo's brow furrowed, his patience starting to wear thin. "This isn't good enough," he said quietly, his words carrying weight. "You're treating people like they don't matter. Look around, you're making everyone wait here, in the dark. You need to take responsibility and show some basic decency." The employee looked at him again, this time with a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Wait a minute," he muttered, clearly realizing that Ronaldo wasn't just another angry passenger. Are you Cristiano Ronaldo?" Ronaldo didn't respond immediately, letting the weight of the silence do the work for him. The young man nodded nervously, taking a step back, his previous rudeness replaced by a sudden flurry of apologies. "Of course, Mr. Ronaldo, I didn't realize. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience, but—" "I don't care if you realize who I am or not," Ronaldo interjected, his voice cool and resolute. "This isn't about me. This is about the people who are waiting for answers. They deserve respect and proper treatment. You've got to do better." The employee, looking uncomfortable, nodded. "I'll try to find out more and get back to you," he stammered, backing away from the counter. Ronaldo watched him retreat, but he wasn't satisfied with the response. His eyes scanned the crowd, and he could see it, passengers growing increasingly irate. The elderly couple was still sitting together, the husband's breathing becoming more labored, while the woman tried to calm him down. Some younger passengers were pacing in frustration, while a few older women were gathered near the gate, whispering loudly about how they would never fly with this airline again. Ronaldo's heart clenched. This wasn't just a matter of a minor inconvenience, it was a matter of people being treated poorly, ignored, and left with no recourse. He couldn't stand by and watch this. Without wasting any more time, he pulled out his phone and called someone he knew at the airline. It wasn't someone from the public relations department or customer service, but a well-connected business partner who had worked with the company before. He explained the situation briefly and asked for assistance. His voice was calm but commanding. "Look, I don't care what it takes," Ronaldo said. "You get me answers right now, and you make sure that these people get taken care of. I'll deal with the rest. I won't stand for this kind of treatment." After a few tense moments on the phone, he hung up. As he stood there, the other passengers noticed the change in his demeanor. His presence seemed to fill the room, not with arrogance, but with a quiet, unwavering authority. It wasn't long before the airline's management team arrived at the gate. The senior staff members, 2 women and a man, looked somewhat flustered, but they quickly tried to restore order. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man said, his voice amplified by the microphone, "we understand that this delay has been inconvenient for all of you. We sincerely apologize for the confusion and the lack of communication. We've been working hard to resolve the situation." The apology was met with skeptical murmurs from the crowd. But before anyone could voice their discontent, Ronaldo stood tall and stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Excuse me," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a sharp breeze. "We don't need your corporate excuses. We need action. You've had hours to fix this, and instead, you've treated people like they don't matter. Do better." The room went silent. The management team stiffened, realizing that Ronaldo wasn't just a celebrity trying to avoid inconvenience. He was genuinely advocating for every passenger there. It was then that the airline staff realized their mistake. The ripple effect of Ronaldo's words was immediate. The senior manager quickly turned to one of his colleagues and whispered something urgently. The crowd began to stir, whispers turning into hopeful murmurs. Minutes later, the announcement came: a new plane was on its way. It would be ready to depart in under an hour. The passengers would be transferred to the new flight immediately, with priority given to the elderly, families, and those with special needs. Ronaldo gave a satisfied nod, though he wasn't done yet. He still had one final message to deliver, one that would resonate far beyond the confines of the airport. "I don't want to hear any more excuses. Do your job," he said, addressing the staff, his voice now softer but no less impactful. And with that, Ronaldo turned, his back to the airline employees, and walked toward the new gate. The passengers, who had been waiting in frustration for hours, were left in stunned silence. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others looked at Ronaldo with a sense of awe. For a few moments, the chaos and frustration seemed to dissipate, replaced by a sense of relief. Not just because the plane had finally been arranged, but because one person had stood up when no one else would. Ronaldo had shown the kind of humanity and leadership that many believed had been lost in the fast-paced world of modern travel. He hadn't been a bystander. He had taken charge, not for his own gain, but for the sake of those around him. And in doing so, he'd earned something far more important than any trophy or award: a deep respect from every passenger who had witnessed his actions. As the crowd began to disperse towards the new gate, the sense of relief was palpable. Ronaldo could feel the tension in the air melt away, replaced by a wave of gratitude from the passengers. People were still whispering, some laughing with disbelief at the turn of events. Most of them had been on edge for hours, but now they were being taken care of, all thanks to a man they never expected to intervene. Ronaldo, for his part, had already turned his attention to the next phase of this strange ordeal. He took a seat in the waiting area, leaning back in his chair with a calm demeanor, as if the events of the past hour had been nothing but another day in his life. But the truth was, Ronaldo had always been a man of principle. It wasn't about the fame or the attention, it was about doing what was right. In that moment, he had used the power of his name not for self-interest, but for the greater good of those around him. As he sat there, a young woman approached him hesitantly. She couldn't have been more than 25, with dark brown hair and a kind face that reflected the kind of appreciation that many others had already expressed in passing glances or short words of thanks. "Excuse me, Mr. Ronaldo," she said nervously, her eyes wide with awe. "I just wanted to thank you for what you did back there. You really stood up for us all." Ronaldo looked up at her with a warm smile, something that seemed to instantly put her at ease. "You don't need to thank me," he replied simply. "I couldn't stand by and watch people get treated like that. Everyone deserves respect." The woman smiled, shaking her head in disbelief. "But you didn't have to do it. You could have just walked away, but you didn't. You really helped us." Ronaldo chuckled softly, leaning forward. "It's not about me. If I'm in a position to help, I'm going to do it. We all should." The young woman nodded, but there was still something in her eyes, a mixture of admiration and something deeper. "I think you've changed a lot of people's lives tonight. I don't know if you realize how much it means to all of us." Her words lingered in the air, and Ronaldo couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Not for his actions, but for the power of solidarity. If he could use his platform to influence change even in something as small as standing up to an airline, he had done his part. As the minutes passed, passengers slowly filed into the new plane, which had now arrived, fully prepared to take off. The elderly couple that Ronaldo had noticed earlier were among the first to board, their faces relieved and grateful. Ronaldo made sure they were helped with their bags, even offering a brief, reassuring word to the elderly man, whose breathing had steadied after his anxiety seemed to subside. The airline staff, now much more cooperative and understanding, were also present, doing their best to help passengers with the transition to the new flight. They no longer wore the same indifferent expressions as they had earlier. It was clear that the shock of Ronaldo's intervention had caused a shift in their behavior. Though many of them still seemed embarrassed, they went about their work with a newfound urgency to make amends. As the last of the passengers boarded, Ronaldo stood and began walking toward the entrance of the plane. He didn't want to draw any more attention to himself, but he couldn't help overhearing the conversations of passengers who had witnessed the drama unfold earlier. He heard snippets of admiration, words of gratitude, and even a few "I can't believe he did that" comments. Once on board, Ronaldo settled into his seat, grateful that this ordeal was nearing its end. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, a stewardess came by to offer a drink to the passengers. Ronaldo accepted the gesture with a polite nod, but his mind was far from the comfort of the flight. His thoughts were with those passengers, the ones who had been treated like second-class citizens for so long, just another number in the airline's eyes. They deserved better, and he had given them better, even if it was only for a few hours. Somewhere between the hum of the engines and the quiet chatter of the passengers around him, Ronaldo began to reflect on his life, on the things he had achieved, the sacrifices he had made, and the impact he had had on the world. But what stood out to him more than anything was the simple truth that, in this moment, he had been a leader not because he was famous, but because he had chosen to stand up for what was right. As the plane soared into the night sky, a voice on the intercom broke the silence, announcing that the flight would be smooth, and that they would be arriving in Madrid in a few hours. Ronaldo closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the gentle sway of the plane and the soft hum of the engines. He had made his mark, not with the flash of a camera or the roar of a stadium crowd, but through his willingness to take action in the face of injustice. It was a lesson he hoped others would learn from, one that had nothing to do with fame or fortune, and everything to do with decency and kindness. The flight continued in peace, and eventually, the lights of Madrid appeared on the horizon. As the plane descended and the passengers began to prepare for landing, the tension that had once gripped them seemed to have vanished completely. Everyone was calm, everyone was at ease, and the memories of the frustrating ordeal at Lisbon airport would soon be nothing more than a faint blur. But for those who had witnessed the events firsthand, who had seen Ronaldo step up when no one else would, they would remember the way a simple act of courage and compassion had changed the entire tone of the evening. And when the plane finally touched down on the runway in Madrid, there was a quiet, unspoken sense of relief that spread throughout the cabin. Some passengers exchanged looks of recognition, silently acknowledging that they had been part of something bigger than themselves, something that transcended the ordinary and ventured into the realm of humanity. Ronaldo didn't need applause, didn't need any grand recognition. He didn't even need anyone to remember the details of that night. But in the quiet, humble way that only a true leader could, he had set an example, one that spoke louder than any headline, any social media post, or any trophy he could ever win. As he walked off the plane and into the terminal, he felt a deep sense of peace. The world wasn't always fair, and sometimes the systems we rely on let us down. But in those moments, the moments when it mattered most, people could make a difference. And Cristiano Ronaldo had just made that difference. Thank you very much, see you in the next video.